Conference comes up. Recording in progress. So I have the huge pleasure today of welcoming Tongli Wang, whose work I discovered about 6 months ago on campus. And of course, my head went, oh, great seminar topic. But I just want to say a little bit about him first. He is associate professor in forest and conservation sciences over in the forestry faculty, but he had quite a bit of life in the public sector world before that. He has something of superpowers for model development in the climate space, in particular, looking at what are now widely used climate models for forestry context, including those that are predicting historical versus future periods for forests, and models that are also more niche, specific to examining changing habitats given climate shifts. Today, however, he's going to talk to us about something we've probably all observed a little bit, which is to say that forests that grew up in one climate regime and grew up as adapted to that regime are now facing quite a bit of shocks, you could say, in reference to what's happening now. And maybe he'll speak to us a little bit about also what makes for good climate data for modeling purposes. Or how much bad data changes things, maybe. Is that about right? Okay, welcome, Tony.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tara, for inviting me to this seminar. I know this seminar has a high impact, and I'm really honored to have the chance to share my thoughts and to present some results of our team. Okay, here is the outline, and we start with the first one: climate change impact and the potential genetic ecological solutions. Take this one off. You know, forests are countdown for climate change mitigation because forests absorb a huge amount of carbon emission from the fossil fuel, and forests also provide the green materials to reduce the use of CO2 intensive materials like cement and steel. And the wooden buildings getting taller and taller now. However, forests can serve such a purpose only when they are happy and healthy and productive. And so they also need to adapt to the changing climate. Otherwise, if they suffer from maladaptation or mismatch, they can be a carbon source instead. So this is very serious. How can we help the trees to adapt to the future climate? So first of all, we need to know the effect of climate change on forest trees. So the climate is a major environmental factor. This is directly affecting the forest tree growth, right? So it has an environmental effect. And also climate is the most important evolutionary force, right? This driving the specific species and local adaptation, resulting among population variation along the climate gradients or environmental gradients. So that's a genetic effect. So both genetic environment, let's cover everything. That's why different type of forests growing under different climate. In other words, different kind of climate will result in different kind of forest types. That's at the ecological, the ecosystem level. But at a species level, regionally, each species can only grow in a given range of climate conditions. At the population level, we know within the range of condition they can survive, they also have among population variations driven by the local adaptation along the climate gradients. For example, here, the climate niche represents a range, and then within that range, and the local adaptation works to make these gradients. This is particularly common in the widespread species like larch pine in North America. So the tree species adapt to a range of climate conditions, and climate change is causing a mismatch. So as a result, and some trees will be left out of their suitable climate conditions or climate niche. Those trees will be vulnerable to diseases and natural disasters and pests. And on the other hand, some air will be available for this species, but due to the rate of the climate change is much faster than the tree can migrate. So there will be a gap in the waste of natural resources. And the aspen, large-scale aspen dieback might be an example of the climate niche mismatch. So they started there, but now the climate is not suitable for them anymore. So the mismatch can happen for species at two levels. One is at a species level, we call that climate niche mismatch, and at the population levels, and among populations happens. For example, those trees are still within their climate niche, but those populations are not in the optimal situation. So the climate niche modeling is widely used to deal with the species level mismatch, and the transfer function, response function, we call it gene ecology function, is used to deal with the mismatch at the population levels. We'll come to that. So first, let's start with the climate niche model. And the climate niche model is built based on the species occurrence data, like shown here, the distribution of a species. And then the climate variables, we got data point for all of this. And then to build a relationship using different kind of modeling algorithm, multiple regression, machine learning. Among all this, we found the random forest classifier is the most effective one to do this job. Then we need to do the spatial predictions. After the model is built, we predict the spatial distribution for the current and the future. Here, for example, we predict a climate suitable niche in such an area at the current climate conditions. And but after we plug in the future climate data, we got a different distribution for the future. Then these two overlay together and form these profiles. This can provide a lot of useful information for understanding how the population will respond at different parts to climate change. So the leading part, overlapping part, and the lagging part. And then it will help us to develop the conservational and the management strategies for the first part, the leading part, assist migration, the middle part, the overlapping part, maybe the in-situ conservation is an important strategy. And the ex-situ part, the conservation, ex-situ conservation, or introducing a new species to this area, it can be important. And we project the biogeoclimatic zones, the ecosystem classification for BC. Everybody probably knows this. And the people worried if the ecosystem classification serve as a foundation for all the research and the management. So those climate change may make this one useless. So we project the future for the system. At the beginning, we use the traditional way using the discriminant analysis and project the future. But we found the relationship is so complicated. The predicting power is not very good. Some results seems weird. So later on, we applied the machine learning, the random forest algorithm to redo the projection. The seems projection is reasonable for the future. However, there's a limit for random forest to do this because it does not reflect novel climate and can only work within the BC. So now I developed in development of the third version, and we can model the novel climate coming to BC. You see some part, the black part is the novel climate. The other part is the climate conditions still already in the BC. You see some part Some zone is expanding dramatically. The interior red cedar zone is very promising for the future. Douglas fir, those important species, is good for the future. And also we realized that there's an issue with the realized niche and the fundamental niche. And the model currently used model is based on the current data. And the climate niche model developed based on those data is predicting the realized niche, which only a proportion of the fundamental niche. So the area predict to be outside of the realized niche may still within their fundamental niche, right? As long as they are within fundamental niche, they will be still fine, okay, because they already there, no competition coming very soon. And assisted migration may not to be limited by the realized niche. We may have a bigger potential to introduce our species. For example, Douglas fir has been introduced over 27 countries, and in Europe, they are overperforming the local species. So this is far beyond our realized niche. We shouldn't be limited by the realized niche. So for doing this, one of my PhD students is working on predicting the fundamental niches using different ways, like a provenance trial-based, and we'll come to that later, and the occurrence-based data. And we just need to, there are some technical issues to overcome to allow those models to predict the fundamental niche. Then the process-based niche models is also not limited by the realized niche. And now we are planning to use the genomic data to also predict the fundamental niche of forest trees. And but the climate niche model can suffer from poor performances. For example, a group here, they model the Douglas fir. Douglas fir, as I mentioned, is native in North America, but has been introduced in Europe very successfully. So they wonder if this model built based on native occurrence data be able to predict the things in Europe to figure out where it's suitable. And then they found they failed to do this. So their conclusion is that the species distributed model or climate niche model can be misleading. So when I see this paper, actually, I also did this, and I found the result, the prediction accuracy is very high. And compared with the observation data, I found my prediction accuracy can nearly 90%. So my conclusion at that time was this is really highly accurate, is amazing. So it's a very contrasting results. So then I wonder what caused these differences. So I follow their procedure. They are using the climate data in the graded format, 4 × 4 kilometer graded format data. And if I use the same data in the same way, my prediction accuracy down from 90% to 20%. So it plays a major role. So what's the difference between this graded climate data and the data I use called the scale-free climate data? Is you can see the contrast. In the mountain area, within one tile, the temperature can change by several degrees. So with the scale-free data, we can overcome that limit. So, and when we model the BC ecosystem, we encounter the same thing. If we use the graded data, the resolution we got is like this. It is pretty not happy. We are not happy with that. But after we use our scale-free climate data, we can model the ecosystem classification in a very accurate way. So now we can explain what is the scale-free climate data we developed. And currently, all the available climate data are in the graded format. So those kind of data providing is on the average of each grade, right? So and also most of those data has a limited number of climate variables. And also those data are in the raster format. If you want, for example, if you want to get climate data for UPC campus, you have to download the whole data set, several gigabytes. So it's, and also previous years, not many people really know the GIS. The GIS skill just happened in recent years. So the great data has been there, sitting there for many years, but not many people using it. So those are the limitations. And we applied a dynamic local elevation adjustment algorithm to overcome the limitation of the grid data. So for example, if this data point is the point we are interested, the program will download the neighbor climate data from the neighbor cell, then to build the regression, to see the regression is the relationship between the temperature differences and the elevation differences. From the graded to scale-free, the elevation is the major things. But the challenge is the effect of elevation on climate is not constant. It's changed dramatically from the south to the north, from east to west. So we have to do this in a dynamic way. So after we applying this one to the graded climate data, we got high scale-free climate data and reflecting all the topography features, the effect. And not only looks beautiful spatially, but also statistically, it really improved the accuracy. For example, the vertical axis is the weather station observations, and the horizontal one is either from our model or from the grid data. The red points is from the grid data. So you can see the improvement is quite substantial. And we developed this scale-free climate data for BC and North America. And also we developed for Asia Pacific. And recently, the European group people use the same method principle to develop one for Europe. So our package has some functions, very powerful, to make the access to climate data very easy. And particularly the time series function for multiple locations. You got hundreds or million locations, you can get climate data for all the years by one run, for the historical years or for the future years. And another function is if you have a digital elevation model, and you can directly input into the package will generate climate layers for you. And the more conventionally easily to use is the web-based one. You can click on the Google map and the climate data will show up. You can save on your computer for different locations. So recently, I'm working on the integration of the climate data into the programming workflow. So I developed the climate web API. The web API allow you to get it from the web browser easily, and also enable your mobile applications. If you are a programmer, you can use this one to integrate climate data into your mobile applications. However, the web-based API has a limit because everything runs on the server. If you want to get climate data for millions of locations, it will crash the server. So then I developed a climate in a command-based line, which can serve as a desktop API. So you can still use in your programming, but it runs on your local machine. So then in order to make this all easy, I developed a climate in a R package. So you can integrate those into your R programming workflow. So that's the part for the climate model. And then come to see how to deal with the among population variations. And for that, we need provenance trials to develop a transfer function and a response function. In the provenance trial, people collect seed from all over the locations, different populations, then plant it at different locations under different kind of conditions. And because for each test site, we have population from many locations, we can develop a transfer function. This is the transfer distance and the performance. This is the relationship. And alternatively, we can also develop a geoquality function. Instead of using the transfer distance, we directly use the original, the seed source climate. This function tells about the same thing. And because they are all growing in a single test size, we can assume the environment conditions are the same. The difference is totally due to where they are from. This reflecting the genetic effect. And alternatively, however, those functions need to be site specific. One function is for one site. You cannot use one site function developed to represent other sites. They have different shapes, the response curves. And alternatively, you can also develop a response function. See, each population are tested over a range of climate conditions. So you can develop a relationship between the site climate and the performance. This reflects the environmental effect. The genetic type, the genotype is given, it's one, but tested over a range of climate conditions. So this is the environmental effect. And also it can reflect plasticity of the population, can see how this population responds over a range of conditions. It's a more straightforward way to apply to the climate change application because climate change is changing the environment, right? However, this needs a lot of test sites. Test sites is more expensive than more seed source. We can put them together. We see how each population perform over a range of climate conditions. And those each curve for each population, on the right side, each curve for one site. And if we combine them together to form a universal response function, that has advantages because that can predict the performance at any locations for any seed source. And we can also quantify what's the contribution of the genetic effect, what's the contribution of the environmental effect. And then we can predict if we use local seed, what will be the consequence for the future. If we use the optimal seed, or choose the best seed source, and what's the future? The future can be very different. And because the productivity, the practice based on the gross use models. And one of my PhD students is trying to integrate this one into gross yield model. But there are a lot of technical challenges. The last part is the landscape genomic approach. And the seed zones are important because we need to reflect the local adaptation. So we divide the zone in the whole range into several zones. And those zones, each zone should have a minimum within zone variation while not having too many zones to manage. And it has been based on common garden experiment, which is expensive, long-term, and not sufficient, and not available for many species. And it's also overlasting debate on how many zones should we have, because there are no clear line. So they have been developed some zones based on the experiment, common garden experiment. And we tried to use the genomic information using the gradient forest and to predict the spatial pattern of the genomic information over all the SNPs we detected from the Adapt Tree project. So this is spatial distribution. How to make the zones? We test the zones within zone genetic variation and the reduction of the zone genetic variation. Yeah, we found this is a reasonable way to to have 6 zones. So we compare with the traditional one, and we found it quite comparable, but we can limit the political boundaries happened in the previous study. And also it overcome the limit of the sample size in the another study. So we found a great potential of this approach. And then now I have another student to pursue on this one to deal with the population structure issues and valid and predict genetic offset due to climate transfer, and also to predict population performance for the future based on the genomic information. And I can skip the summary because the time limit, but the things I cannot skip is my thanks to Dr. Sally. I have been working as a postdoc and a research associate for 20 years with her, and she provided the platform and the support for me to work on the things I'm interested in. This is really important for me. And then the sponsors to support me and my students. Thanks. Any questions?
We have 15 to 20 minutes, so maybe I'll let you, Tongli, just allow or put hands and volume.
Yes.
As we were waiting for questions, would you go to the summary slide?
Okay, sure. Okay. Yes.
So much I'm not a modeler, but we have a lot of modelers in our lab. I'm wondering, I have a question about the problem file.
Okay.
So if the files were established in 1974, are the functions that you derived to predict change still accurate for the level of the speed of climate change that we're seeing now if those files were established?
Good question. You know, we are using the spatial variation in climate to substitute the climate change in the future. So there can be limitations, right? But what we did is based on 20 years performance. And if the climate difference like that, and then the transfer distance will have such an effect. In other words, if we plan the genotype over a range of conditions, and we can see how this genotype responds to different climate, that's spatially. But the timely, yeah, this depends on the climate projections. The climate projections changes from now is SIMP6, and the change from SIMP4, SIMP5, they always making changes. So yes. Oh, yes. We the current version.
Can you repeat the question for the people on?
Oh, I sorry. About the representative pathways in the climate change scenarios. Now that's the term used for the SIMP5 version 5. The new version SIMP6 is called shared social SSP pathways. Yes. So our new model incorporate how many? We incorporate 13 models, and then we also develop ensembles. So the current one, we are updated with the GCM projections. Yes, you can get individual years for the future, or ensembles, or individual GCMs, all there. Most complete data set. Yes. Yes.
Thanks so much for the presentation. So I'm really interested in the climate models that you developed. I'm curious about it because so it seems like you took this like what was it 4x4 kilometer cell grid, and then you superimposed elevation. You kind of got like the difference between
Each cell,
like,
yeah.
Yeah, what elevation would tell you, and then that 4x4 kilometer grid. So, like, wouldn't then you see these like kind of stark differences at the boundary of each cell, and how did you handle that?
Good point. Yes, at the beginning we have, oh yeah, how did I handle the grid boundaries while do the downscaling to make it smooth, right? And at the beginning, I simply apply this dynamic one, and then when I predict at a high resolution, I found the clear boundaries among the cells. So I add a bilinear interpolation in the middle. Okay, so for each one, we have a lapse rate for each cell, then add the interpolation, make them smooth. Yes.
And sorry, just to follow really fast, the resolution of your new model, it seemed like almost like infinite.
Oh, it's infinite.
Yeah.
Yes, because it's a formula based. It depends. If you input the data, one data point, it will give you climb data for that specific data point. If you want to develop a climb map, if your input map is at 100 meter, the output will be 100 meter. If it's at 5 meters, the output will be 5 meters. Yeah.
Amazing.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
just trying to understand two things. One is the effect of elevation was so profound in sort of correcting those models. And then later you said that elevation, the effect of elevation varies quite a bit. So can you
Okay.
explain those two things?
Yes. The elevation. Repeat the question. Yes. So how the elevation is very important for downscaling the grid data into scale free. However, the elevation also varies. How do I handle this? The dynamic the elevation effect on climate is changed a lot. We have a standard one is 100 meter increase by elevation, and the mean ambient temperature reduced by 0.65 degrees. But this one only occur at given location. And for example, in BC here, 100 meter increase will reduce the temperature will reduce by 0.6. But in Yukon, 100 meter increase, it may be other way, or maybe no change. So it's from location to location. And also there is a temperature inversion phenomenon. In some cells, the elevation increase result in increase in minimum temperature in the winter. So those are all complicated things. And the grid data, they consider all the matters in it, but the limit is the resolution. But the grid data already reflect this one. Yeah. Yes.
Are there, sorry, following up on that, are there certain variables that the elevation-based scaling works better than other variables?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Are there differences in, yes. Yes, I'm trying to repeat. Okay, I always forget. So it's the elevation effect varies among the climate variables. Yes, it varies. And the elevation effect, the elevation adjust has the best effect on the maximum temperature. The max temperature is daily max temperature average over a month. The minimum temperature in the winter, the elevation adjustment is not very sensitive overall, but some locations still sensitive. Yes.
Is it just temperature, or do you do it for like precipitation and other?
Yeah, it also adjusts for precipitation. The relationship between temperature and the elevation in the mountain area is very strong. Over 90% the variation in temperature can be explained by the elevation differences. But for precipitation, this relationship is much weaker. So to avoid over adjustment, I multiply the R square in it. So if the relationship is weak, I reduce the weight of the adjustment. Yes.
So, like you were saying that in the relationship with things like like zero sum. You
Yeah.
can remember, but that's different things. I'm wondering like at what scale are you like is this like for the mountain range or is it for like, so imagine like if like a mountain is steeper than another one, like that might also affect the temperature difference. So there's a different elevation aside from like the actual physical location. Like what level of like, how specific are you getting?
So the elevation adjustment is that considering is the aspect or steepness of the slope considered? Good question. So the adjustments still have limit. So all the adjustment based on the grade data. And what we add into it is the elevation. But the aspect, the terrain directions, all those, we rely on the grade data already consider that. Within the tiles, those effects we are not considering. So the steepness, those may be the random factors which are not explained by the 90% of the R square. That's maybe the rest. Yes?
Like zones are sort of shifting in terms of
Yeah.
Maybe not you, but are people investigating like are there or is this now a question of are we because of the Douglas curve that are
Okay, good question. I will repeat the question. Okay, so the question is the predict the shift indicate that for the new climate we need to introduce suggest to introduce a new species. Will that happen? And yes, already happening. See, like a Western larch, originally only in the southern BC, small area planting, but the Western larch showed a very good productivity and a good wood quality, and some private sector already planted in the north, the middle BC. So the BC ministry, based on the model projection and based on the experience, so they already changed the policy, allow the Western larch to be planted in a much northern bigger areas. This is one thing. Another thing is, BC, the productivity is the low temperature is still a limit, right? But increasing temperature will increase productivity, but it causes mismatch. So there's different things. And we predict Douglas fir has a bigger area, suitable area for the red cedar has bigger suitable areas. And those already, those two species mostly in US, but already largely in BC. We can increase this and prepare to help them to plant in more broader areas. I think if we do this, we can take advantage of the warming climate and produce prolonged, more productive good species in BC. And also in the same context, they predict the agricultural productive area will shift northward. Canada will benefit, Russia will benefit. So we need to take the right to take the climate change has many negative effects, but there are something if we use well, we can take some advantage of it. Yeah. Oh yes.
Actually, I'm trying to model what's by and carbon dynamics, and I just wonder if you model and have to change and impacts on economics, issue competition and geological curve, and you have three major imports combined from next 300. I mean, a longer time.
Okay, so you are working on the carbon sequestration capacity modeling, right? And can my model prediction be helpful? Can be used for your to help your modeling? I think so, because those carbon sequestration modeling often based on the back zones, right? If we predict this, the productivity or the capacity it varies among zones. If you use those projections, the shift of the back zones climatically, you may predict the potential, right? The carbon sequestration potential for different areas. So, so the projection of the the biogeoclimatic zones for BC has been widely used, and the local branches, they develop adaptive strategies based on this. Also, the ministry changed their stocking standard or the species selections following those projections.
And I saw one slide that on the two students, how can it have growth and I wonder, so maybe some how can
So one of my PhD students is going to work on integrating those functions into gross yield model, how the climate change will impact growth in the yield. And yeah, we have some results, and like what I predict on the map, right? If you use in the local seed, the productivity will increase for near future, but it will decrease for longer future. And those are the predictions. And those predictions are now in the geological, geology function fashions. But BC, the forest practice, they rely on the gross yield model. And but the gross yield model so far is not considering these factors. So we are trying to fill the gaps in between. Time? Hey, yes.
So, volunteer for forest governance, I'm curious, so the model for forest governance?
So urban, the BC. Okay, the question is, the action seems taken on by the provincial government. How about the urban cities? Do they can use the same result, something like that, right? Yeah, urban forest governors. Can the urban forest governor use the similar results? You know, the biogeoclimate zone cover everywhere in BC, so they can still use that as a reference. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tongli. I think you've left your email there for the models in the audience who might want to, it's tongli.wang@ubc.ca.
Yes.
For people who are modeling and might be wanting to import some of these options into our work. And beyond that, thank you very much.
Thank you.